Hello. There we go. All right. All right, so I'm going to do a talk on ActionText today. It is a what you see is what you get editor. If you've never seen one of those, then just go online, go somewhere, and you'll probably run across one. It's those fancy things that give you the option to make a text bold, to make it italics, and to do other fancy things, insert images into a text area. And so that's what we're going to look at today, because ActionText is something that's coming in Rails 6. It is currently being developed, and there's a lot of controversy about it, because a large shift in the community has gone to the JavaScript front-end framework side of things. And here is the Rails core introducing something into Action View, which is the ActionText. And it's one of those things where a lot of people said that, why would you do something like that? Why are you doing this? And because I think sticking to the core Rails philosophy and pairing that with turbolinks and with stimulus, there's really no real reason, unless if you're building a massive enterprise application, to really be SPA. So I think something like Photoshop, Gmail, Office 365 applications are great examples of when to use SPAs or single page applications. But for the most part, I think it's heavily abused. And the Rails core obviously kind of thinks that as well. So they introduced ActionText into their core code base. And a lot of people said, well, why don't you introduce something like Devise, bring that into the Rails core, or something else that every application is going to set up and use. So some kind of authentication or authorization. And my thought around that is that ActionText, or your what you see is what you get editor, is something that's not exactly trivial to set up within your own application. And it's going to be something that is a recurring theme. So whenever you're doing any kind of text area, you're going to be reaching for whatever plugin choice that you're using. And in this case, it is the ActionText. Whereas the authentication, that's a one-time setup for your application. It's not going to be a recurring thing that you have to deal with within the application. So it is something where it doesn't really make sense to put the effort to build that into core. You know, these are just my opinions of why ActionText is getting in there before authentication. And I think authorization could be a valid argument, though. So that's what I look like on the internet. If you've seen that picture around floating up there, that's me. That's even on my resume. So I got my brand recognition going there. And that is my tweet handle or Twitter handle. So @Cobalts. I currently work for Sage, and I've been there for about almost 10 years now. So I didn't start off as a developer. I started off on the bottom line, you know, as a support person, but I quickly climbed up within a few years and landed myself a internal development position. And I've been doing the Ruby on Rails development for about 7 years there. You may recognize my voice because I'm on the Ruby Rogues podcast as a panelist. So each week, Charles Maxwood does a talk with guests about Ruby, and I am one of the panelists on there. My voice may also sound familiar from Drift and Ruby Screencasts, which is a screencast site that I host and run, where I do weekly iterations of screencast videos. And if you are looking to further your knowledge in Ruby, then I am running a promotion on the ATLRUG to subscribe for $9 a month.
I'm a customer. It's great.
Let's see. Oh, thank you for tweeting me, Frank. I saw that pop up on my phone. It's like, why is Frank trying to get a hold of me? I'm right here. Why can't you just talk to me?
I'm promoting your talk.
All right, so with ActionText, what's involved? Is anyone unfamiliar with WYSIWYG editors? I assume that everyone has seen them at one point or another. But we're going to see what they are very quickly. And if you look at the code base for ActionText, the README file, it's pretty simply laid out, but it is geared for Rails 6. You can use it in a Rails 5 application, but there's a lot of nuances that you may not realize until you actually start using it and discovering that image uploads do not work natively, or they do work natively, but they don't work well with a Rails 5.2 application. So in this, I didn't have much time to prepare this talk, so I'm going to kind of wing it, building a fresh Rails 5.2 application and then pulling in ActionText. So you guys get to bark at me and tell me what I'm doing wrong along the way. Okay, I don't have an escape key on this laptop. It's horrible. All right, there we go. It is Mac. Why would you get rid of the escape key? I feel bad for the Vim users out there. All right. I really don't. All right, so the first thing that I'll do is I'll check, make sure that I have Rails 5.2 installed. So when I do a Rails new, and then I'm just going to call this the action, I'm not a good talker and typer, ActionText example. But the first problem that I made, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that, is that we are going to create the application with Webpack. So you do have to use Webpacker with the ActionText because it's going to pull the JavaScript libraries in so you're able to use them. So if you don't have Webpack in your application, that's something that you're going to have to set up separately. But because I'm starting up a new, fresh application, that's not that big of a deal. So this is going to take a minute to install the 5,000 different dependencies of Webpack. 761. Yep. Oh, 14,000 some odd. So usually
JavaScript dependencies, that means each one is like one line.
Yeah. Yeah, left pad, what? All right, there we go. So I'm going to clear my screen so you guys can see. Ooh. All right, so changing my directory, and then I'm just going to generate a scaffold. And if you're unfamiliar what a scaffold is, it is basically just creating the CRUD of a model. So we're going to create an article, and the article is going to have a title and a content. So the content is where we're going to put in our action text or our WYSIWYG editor. And so you may want to make this a larger field. Otherwise, if you just leave it like this, it's going to be a string and limited to 255 characters on the database side. Or you can make it something a bit bigger. But in this case, because it's just a super simple example, I'm just going to leave it as a string, and hopefully I don't get bitten by that. Scaffold. There we go. All right. And then I'm also going to run a generator called the actions, or it is the active storage install. And active storage is a Rails 5.2 new feature which gives you the ability to handle file upload. So Thoughtbot actually deprecated paperclip in favor for active storage, and through polymorphic associations you can add file uploading to any model within your application without the need of a database migration. Man, this is going to be a fun talk. So it's not Rails generate active storage install, it is just Rails active storage install. All right, and all that did was create a database migration for us. So I'm going to go ahead and launch my editor, and within here we can then start adding in the active action text. So that looks big enough. Can you guys read that, sort of? All right. So in our gem file at the bottom, I'm just going to add in a couple of gems, and these gems are for the action text. Let's see. And I don't have them memorized here, so we get to go look for it. All right, so their README is really good. So I would definitely recommend checking it out because it's going to get you most of the way there. So all we're going to do is copy the action text and the image processing, which is kind of a replacement for Minimagic. And it's going to allow you, or for image magic, and it's going to allow you to do the image variant or the resizing of images when you upload them. Okay. All right, so I got that pasted in there. All right, and once you get this in there, you can launch your terminal. You can run bundle to install those gems. Let's see. All right, so those gems are installed. And while I'm also in the console, I'm going to go ahead and now run the action text. So just Rails action text install, and we'll see what it installs. So immediately you'll see that it creates a couple of different files, which I'll scroll back up to those. But then it also taps into Webpacker, and then it does a few things. And you can see down here at the end that it appended something into our packs application.js, which we'll have to go in and have a look at in a moment. But the one thing that we are going to definitely be working with is that it created this view helper for us. And this view partial is going to need to be changed because we're running Rails 5.2.2 instead of Rails 6. So there is going to be some differences within that file. I'll go ahead and close my terminal for now because we're basically done with that. Then in the JavaScript packs application.js, we will need to add in this into our layouts file. And the only thing it added in here was import action text. So now we have the action text library installed on our project. However, now we need to tell our project to use it. And because it's in this packs application.js file, we need to go into our layouts and add that into the layout. So just in the head, at the end there, I'll just do copy and paste the JavaScript pack tag application. All right, so we're halfway there now. So if you remember our controller, we created a scaffold, and that has the title and the content. So there's actually nothing that we have to do in our controller because we've generated the content with our scaffold generator. If you did not, if this is something that you're adding to your file or to your controller or your model after the fact, then you would need to whitelist that parameter so that it would be saved. But in our model, that's really the only structural change that we have to do. So in the app models article.rb, we can then just reference to say that we have the rich text. So this is a helper has rich text, and then we would specify the attribute. In this case, it is the content. So once you have action text installed, and once you just point to a field, then this is all you have to really do to get it to tie in on the back end. On the front end side, because our scaffold generator, it generated a few things, and in the form is where we have the reference to our content. And for this, we just have to change this to it's not a text field anymore. Instead, now it is a rich text area. All right, so that's basically all we have to do to get an initial setup of our application. So I'm going to go ahead and migrate our database. Because I created the new Rails application without specifying my database, then it's just going to use SQLite. So running a Rails DB migrate, it created our articles table, the active storage tables, the active storage tables blob stuff. So we got the blobs and the attachments. Then also our action text rich text. All right, so moment of truth. I'm going to go ahead and launch this and we'll see what happens. Yep, I have Chrome here. So I can just go to my localhost, port 3000, and I'll just go to the /articles in path. All right, so there's our articles. We'll create a new article. And so now we got our WYSIWYG editor. And that was very minimal effort. To try to add this in using something else, you would have to find a library that you like. You would then have to try to get it to work within your application. If you have turbolinks, if it's an older library, then you have to make sure all of that stuff's compatible. This just works. It was very simple. I didn't have to do much of any code, and it works. So I can just type in something like hello world. So we're back to writing hello world tests. And we can make it bold. We can create our article. And then we got our fancy text there. So that's really the basics of ActionText. So let's go back in here. And I'm going to just take a screenshot of something. All right, so I've taken a screenshot. Now I'm going to paste it in here. So it supports images. And I can then save this. And the image is broken. So there is some more programming that we have to do. We are not done yet. But if you go back, and the weird thing is, if you edit it, your image is there again. But if you go to update it, the image is gone. So what the heck's going on?
We can inspect element of the missing image.
You're better off looking at the logs to see the mess of what it's saying. So mini magic error, more by resize to fit. What the heck does that mean? Now, if you're unfamiliar with image uploading and resizing, that's going to be one of those crazy errors that you start Googling around for errors and for hours and hours, and you're just going to find like PHP references, because this has nothing to do with Rails, or Ruby, in fact. So let's go ahead and fix this issue. So if you remember, I said that we're going to be going into the active storage blobs and look at this partial helper that it created for us. Let's see, I'll go ahead and kill my terminal here and hide that. So this was generated from the ActionText installer. So this resize to fit won't work for us because we're on a Rails 5.2.2 application. If you were on Rails 5.6, it would have just kind of magically worked. Instead, I think you have to use the resize. So we have to use resize. But if you use this, then you would get the same error, but instead of resize to fit, it would just be on resize instead. And that's because the default text, because we are using Rails 5.2.2, doesn't support an array here. Instead, we have to give it the old 800 by 600. And then the same thing for the higher resolution one. And so if I save this, then it should work, right? Because we fixed the error. No, because for whatever reason, the default Rails application is going to try to look for this image at example.com / and then the domain path. So we have to set up our localhost domain in order for it to work. So I'm going to close this out, go into the config environments development. And just within here, I'll just paste this in. If you've ever installed Devise, you would see something like this as part of the instructions to do. And it's kind of funny, and this is kind of a little rant. What does Action Mailer have to do with my file uploads, and why does it even care? But apparently this is where it is to configure the default URL options, and so that's the change that we have to make. I have no idea what Rails W does. So I'll launch my Rails server again. I'll go back to my application. I'll refresh the screen. We got our image. So That's all you have to do to set up ActionText with images and all of that stuff into your application. Yes?
Can we look at the view that actually renders this article? Or
Yeah.
see if it's .html safe or sanitized?
No, it's neither.
Really?
It is neither.
What do they do now?
Nothing. It's all magic, right?
Okay.
So there it is, the article content, nothing. Does that make you feel safe, or does that kind of make you shiver in your boots?
I wonder, under the hood, are they doing sanitize? At which point, you would know this if your sanitized configuration and your initializers, if the tag is not listed there, whether or not the tag can be entered in the editor.
I would imagine that they are doing some kind of sanitization, and that the tags that they have available, which are pretty reasonable and nothing too invasive, that those are sanitized. But if we were to inspect this element and kind of go in here and see and play with it. So it is using the tricks editor, but there should be a hidden input article content.
It's just escaped.
Yep. But I wonder if we can do something like a script.
Yeah, let's just try. That could be.
Because I know SummerNote.js, which is another WYSIWYG editor, is prone to this vulnerability if you're not doing the sanitizing.
Boom. Haha, that works too.
So now I just have to save this, update the article. Ah, look at that, they are escaping it. So this, what Frank and I were talking about, is a very common way for malicious intent, where people aren't going to really steal your data, or they could if they wrote an evil enough script. But this is cross-site scripting, where you are allowing them to inject in JavaScript code to execute on your application when you did not intend for it. So this is another reason why to stick with something like ActionText opposed to bringing in a library on your own, because like I said, SummerNote, which is a very popular WYSIWYG editor, by default, if you bring it into your application, we would have gotten an alert instead. So that's really cool that they are actually escaping that and sanitizing the user input.
I bet you that. It'd be interesting to see what they're using under the hood. But yeah, that's great.
But where did my image go?
Ah.
I guess it saw that. It was like, hey, we're not allowing that. We're just gonna. It probably just at that point sanitize a lot of stuff. Yeah. Because now the alert is gone. So I think when it is, but if I edit this again and then change something and save it, the image should stay. Oh, SQL. That's interesting. That's weird. Any other questions? That's right. It's beta, right? Wow, that's unique. Yeah, it definitely is an issue with active storage. Or with my app, you know.
Constraint. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's.
Why would it be not
Is
doing
it
else?
trying to insert a new one instead of updating the existing one or something?
That's what it looks like. But you know, that's probably a SQLite thing. I bet if we were to run this on MySQL or something, maybe it would play a little bit different. But it's a work in progress. Yeah.
What is the storage like on the database side?
The storage?
How's it stored? Is it just HTML or
Yeah, it's a.
fully like HTML like save escape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, come to think of it, I don't even think that I needed to, on my scaffold generator, I don't even think I needed to add the content, because that gets stored in the action text on the database side. So I could have just added this field in here, and then in the controller added in the whitelist parameters.
Have you tried, have you tried like doing a copy paste from like Microsoft Word or something and doing to
See what kind of
sanitizes
encoding. Word.
Oh, you actually have Word.
Yeah, I have a 365 subscription, you know. All right, let's find a template. Okay, I went pretty bold here.
No, that's a bridge too far. Well, that's bold and stuff.
Yeah.
no, the formatting. That's actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, honestly, I think I would prefer this than them to try to interpret the monstrosity that Word does to a document. So.
Yeah, we're using a WYSIWYG plugin called CK Editor.
Mm-hmm.
And we run into problems all the time with people copying and pasting off of the Windows machine, copy and pasting from Word, and inserting character terms.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
don't
God.
translate well into certain databases.
Yeah, and not to mention the layouts that CK Editor will take in. Like if you have any kind of table layouting in there.
Table. What if you copy from Excel? Does it do a table?
Damn it, Frank. I don't know, but I'm curious now. No, I will not help you make it better. All right, do you want a chart as well, or just the table? Okay.
Just the table.
All right. Here, I'll even try to copy the entire spreadsheet because that's what most people will do.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Edge case testing here. Oh, look at that. Look at that.
Yeah, you'd have to do some work to like to do something.
Yeah.
That's like Markdown. That's Markdown, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't exactly space it out very nicely.
Plan that.
Yeah.
But that's cool.
Yeah, that's still preferable than it trying to do some, you know, embedding its own table and stuff.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
Does it protect from XSS in the editor? Do you have like, so you put the malicious string there a second ago, if you edit the document, how does it prevent that?
Yes, so if you were to actually put it into the tricks editor, it's definitely going to sanitize that. So,
That's one that CK editor tries to do and doesn't do a great job at.
really?
Yeah. Because if you do, like you can trick it by like putting two, like an opening HTML block and then another opening HTML block.
Oh, yeah.
And it like goes to the end of the first document. It's like, okay, I sanitized it.
So let's see. So you mean something like that?
Yeah, like you can just do all kinds of things to like trick it. It's basically like string parsing and sanitizing.
Yeah.
Obviously, a hacker's always going to overcome something.
So I'm just guessing that they're using sanitize under the hood since that's kind of been part of Rails for a while.
Okay.
And that's going to actually pull up Loofah and actually parse the DOM.
But it doesn't do any kind of like hard sandboxing or anything.
No.
So I think if you actually use the editor, it's going to do the encoding, so that's not going to work. You actually have to go in and inspect the element to find the actual input that it uses in order to inject in that. So if we go into the actual input, not where it's the rich text editor, and then insert that in. Yeah, it sanitizes it well enough. So, cool. Yeah.
Do you have any configuration options as far as like disallowing certain kind of tags? Or things like that?
Yeah, I haven't played around with it, but they do have, I believe they have some examples where you can do custom stylings and then inserting in your own tags. But I would think that in order to insert in your own tags, you would have to find out how it's parsing it and then whitelist those tags so they're allowed. But I would think, I think the tricks editor has that in there, and so it would be probably a hybrid solution on that.
inserting tables and stuff like that, or just basics?
I would say that it's going to be able to do whatever the tricks editor can do and what people have found that the tricks editor can do. Here. But I know that they intentionally kept it pretty simple, that they didn't make it too complicated, because it's the actual WYSIWYG that they use for Basecamp. So it does support like some side-by-sides and stuff. Yeah, but
Kind of feel like a full like page designer kind of thing.
yeah, I don't think it has that where it can, yeah.
Company we use it right now to basically create email layouts.
And I remember Mercury on Rails 3 was a really popular one to go full screen, to have almost like a Microsoft Word view, but I don't think it's really been maintained lately. All right. Anything else?
This is awesome. That's a great tool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, quick